Chicago Bears History by Chris Canals. From Bill George to Dick Butkus to Mike Singletary to Brian Urlacher, there have been many great players to play on the Chicago Bears. One of the most historic franchises in the NFL are the Chicago Bears. Before moving to Chicago, the Bears were from Decatur and were called the Decatur Staleys. The Decatur Staleys were founded by George Papa Bear Halas on September 17, 1920. Coming into the season, the Chicago Bears were celebrating their 100th season in the NFL. In those years, they have won a total of 8 NFL championships and 1 Super Bowl, and they have a total of 30 players in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 9 is the second in the most championships won in the NFL, as 30 players in the Hall of Fame is the best by any team in the NFL. Chicago has always been known for putting together an amazing defense. That is why they are known as the Monsters of the Midway. I will be informing you on the 1985 to 1986 Chicago Bears season, the 2006 to 2007 Chicago Bears season, and then the 2019-2020 Chicago Bears season. The first Chicago Bears team I was going to talk about is the 1985 to 1986 Chicago Bears Super Bowl team. This was one of the most iconic defenses to ever play in the NFL, getting the nickname Monsters of the Midway. Chicago Bears head coach was Mike Ditka, and he had an amazing defensive coordinator named Buddy Ryan, who created the 46 defense. This defense was ran by Mike Singletary, Wilber Marshall, Richard Dent, Steve McMichael, William Perry, Dan Hampton, Otis Wilson, and Gary Fensick. The offense consisted of Walter Payton, Jim McMahon, Willie Gaunt, Matt Suhey, and Jimbo Covert. The Bears opened the season with Tampa Bay. After being down, they came back to beat the Buccaneers by 10, winning 38-28. The defense did not show up for that game. The Bears beat a team that would later be in the Super Bowl, the New England Patriots, by 30. The next week, the Bears caught themselves down to the Vikings by 3 scores with 3 minutes left of the third quarter. The Bears' offense rallied back to come back to win 37-24. Next week, they had another matchup against the Buccaneers again. In another tough matchup, the Bears beat the Bucs 27-19, reaching a start of 5-0 on their season. The next 5 games, the Bears' defense stepped up. In those 5 games, they did not allow more than 10 points to any of their opponents in that 5-game stretch. In that stretch, they beat the 49ers, Packers, Vikings, Packers, and the Lions. Next 2 games, the Bears were dominated on all phases of the game. With 2 shutouts in a row, the Bears reached a record of 12-0. They beat the Cowboys 44-0 and the Atlanta Falcons 36-0. After this, the Bears started to write the song, The Super Bowl Shuffle, featuring some of the Chicago Bears players at the time. This was when the Bears started to think they would reach the 1972 Dolphins record of 16-0. However, the next week, the Bears faced the Miami Dolphins, losing 38-24. Going to 12-1, the Bears had their playoff chances locked up. They weren't worried as they went and won 3 games straight and entered the playoffs, the number 1 seed in the NFC, with a bye the first round. The Bears hosted the New York Giants in the divisional round of the playoffs. The Bears showed their dominance, winning 21-0. The NFC Championship game was in Chicago versus the Los Angeles Rams. The Bears once again came and dominated, winning 24-0, giving them a trip to New Orleans to play the New England Patriots in Super Bowl 20. The Bears showed no mercy in the Super Bowl. Chicago won 46-10 in the Super Bowl, making them Super Bowl champs and allowing them to release their song, The Super Bowl Shuffle. This was one of the most historic seasons for the Chicago Bears. Next is the 2006-2007 Chicago Bears season. This season, they made it to the Super Bowl. However, they lost to the Colts. Lovie Smith was the Chicago Bears head coach that season. Defense was led by Brian Urlacher, Charles Tillman, Lance Briggs, Israel Adonijah, and Tommy Harris. Offensively, it was Rex Grossman, Devin Hester, Thomas Jones, and Bernard Berryman. This was another team that was carried by its defense. The Bears opened the season off with 3 straight divisional rivals. They were the Packers week 1, the Lions week 2, and the Vikings week 3. So 3 big games, and the Bears didn't disappoint as they beat all 3 of them to start 3-0. The next 4 games were the Seahawks, Bills, Cardinals, and 49ers, as they went and beat all 4 of them to go 7-0. The Cardinals game was the breakout game for return specialist Devin Hester and the defense as they came back from being down 23-0. This is one of the most iconic Bear games in recent history. Starting 7-0, they started to believe they could go undefeated and win it all. However, the next week they played the Miami Dolphins, where they lost 31-13. Another time, the Dolphins ruined their chances of a perfect season. However, the next week they turned it up, beating the Giants 38-20. They then followed the game up with a win over the Jets 10-0. Right when they thought they had stuff turned around, they lost to the Patriots 13-17. After thinking they would make another run, they lost for the second time in a row. The Chicago Bears record was 9-2 at the time of this time of the season. They followed up the loss with a big win versus the Vikings and the Rams, getting back on track. The next game against the Buccaneers, where they beat them in overtime in a 3-point game, putting their record at 12-2. Next, they faced the Lions in a win 26-21. Finally, they ended the regular season benching all the starters, where they lost to the Packers in a lopsided affair. Chicago finished the season 13-3 with a first-round bye in the playoffs. In the divisional round, the Bears faced the Seahawks in a tight battle. However, the Bears came out on top 27-24. The NFC Championship was against the Saints, where the Bears beat them in a blowout 39-14, sending them to the Super Bowl once again in 21 years. The Super Bowl was hosted in Miami against the Colts. However, the Super Bowl didn't go their way as Peyton Manning and the Colts' run game tore up the Bears, sending them home with a 17-29 loss in the Super Bowl. This was the first Super Bowl that 2 African-American coaches coached in it. Tony Dungy ended up being the first African-American coach to win a Super Bowl. Finally, the 2019-2020 Chicago Bears season didn't go as planned. The year after making the playoffs for the first time since 2011 failed to do so after having Super Bowl hype going into the year. With Chicago having Matt Nagy as their head coach, they believed they could do anything. The Monsters of the Midway had Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, Kyle Fuller, Roquan Smith, and Eddie Jackson returning from the previous year on the defense side of the ball. Offensively, the Bears had Mitch Trubisky, Tariq Cohen, Allen Robinson, and Anthony Miller coming back for them. The Bears came into the season having their eye on one thing, and that was the Vince Lombardi Trophy. With all the hype of being the 100th season of the NFL, the Bears opened this season against Green Bay. In this game, they disappointed their fans by only putting up a total of 3 points in the game, losing 10-3 to the Packers. Offense simply couldn't move the ball on the Green Bay defense. After losing the first game, the Chicago Bears went 3-0 to be 3-1 after beating the Broncos, Redskins, and Vikings with dominant defense in all 3 of those games. After the win streak, the Bears had to fly to London and play the Oakland Raiders. Chase Daniel got the start at quarterback after Mitch Trubisky injured his shoulder. Chicago had jet lag, getting down by 3 scores quick, however came back and ended up losing in the final minutes to John Gruden's Raiders. After the bye week, after the Raiders game, Chicago got shown up by losing 3 games in a row to the Saints, Chargers, and Eagles. Defense played god-awful against these teams. Offense still couldn't find the identity. Mitch returned against the Saints looking a bit shaky. After dropping to 3-5, Chicago had a division game against Detroit, who was missing Matthew Stafford. They beat Detroit, but the game was close with a score of 20-13. Next, they went to LA and played the Rams, losing to them and having a record of 4-6. It was now time for Chicago to turn it up and to try to make a run to make the postseason. The Bears made a mini run going 3-0 against the Giants, Lions, and Cowboys. Both sides of the ball started turning things up as they had urgency to make the playoffs. Chicago then played the Packers, losing by 8 in the game that ended the Bears' playoff hopes. The following week, the Chiefs stomped the Bears, as you could tell they gave up the season. Then they played the Vikings, who benched everyone as they clinched the playoffs, and the Bears ended the season with a win. The Chicago Bears ended the 2019-2020 season 8-8 after finishing 8th in the NFC and 3rd in the NFC North. That was a disappointing season for the Bears players and fans, as the team knows it disappointed a lot of people. Chicago had a lot of historic seasons. I touched on 2 of the historic seasons in the most recent years for the Chicago Bears. This was supposed to be the Bears' year this past season. However, it definitely didn't go the way they planned, or their fans wanted it to happen. It doesn't matter season after season, Bear fans still support them and stay loyal, and that is all that matters. Now I have a slideshow, and my slideshow talks about the Chicago Bears seasons 1985, 2006, and 2019. All right, the first year is the Super Bowl team. That was the 85-86 Bears. We were Super Bowl champs. We had a record of 18-1 through the regular season and the playoffs. The head coach was Mike Ditka, and they made the Super Bowl shuffle. They were nicknamed the Monsters of the Midway. Some of the key players: Walter Payton, Jim McMahon, Jimbo Covert, Willie Gaunt, William Perry, Mike Singletary, Dan Hampton, Wilbur Marshall, and Otis Wilson. Next, we have the 2006-2007 season. We were NFC champs. We had a record of 15-4 record through the regular season and playoffs. Head coach was Lovie Smith, lost in the Super Bowl to Peyton Manning and the Colts. We brought back the Monsters of the Midway, however, on defense. Some of the key players were Rex Grossman, Thomas Jones, Devin Hester, Olin Kreutz, Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Charles Tillman, and Israel Adonijah. All right, 2019-2020, missed the playoffs, had an 8-8 record with no playoffs. Head coach was Matt Nagy, 3rd place in the NFC North. It was the 100th season. Key players: Mitch Trubisky, Tariq Cohen, Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, Roquan Smith, Danny Trevathan, Kyle Fuller, and Eddie Jackson. And some fun facts. The Bears were founded by George Halas, founded in 1920. Relocated to Chicago in 1921. They were originally known as the Decatur Staleys. They're a 9-time NFL champion, and they have a total of 32 Hall of Famers. And that is it.